Welcome, my friends. This is Maniacal Incorporated. I was out doing a bit of shopping when I was possessed by unknown forces. I have burst into the nearest building. I think this is an insurance broker's. I've taken control of one of the workstations. There's a lot of people running around and they are very confused. And I have downloaded everything that I need to make a video on strange moods and artifacts in Dwarf Fortress. Now, the basics of strange moods is really simple. A dwarf will be taken by a strange mood. They will take over a workshop. They will gather all of the items that they need, and they will construct an artifact. Or they will fail to do so, and they will go insane. And really, that's it. But in this video, I want to go into some of the finer details, into some of the minutiae, and tell you about the aspects of this that you can manipulate. So our first question is, when exactly does a strange mood occur? In the background, there is a countdown ticking away towards 0, and when it reaches 0, it checks a number of conditions, and if those conditions are met, then there is a chance of a strange mood occurring. It's a bit advanced, it's a bit complicated. If you want to take a look at it, I'll post a link below in the description to the Dwarf Fortress wiki page on strange moods. But the most important things that you need to know are that strange moods will not occur until you have 20 dwarves in your fort. If you fall below that number, if the population drops below that number, strange moods will stop occurring. And the other thing to note is that it looks like strange moods happen maybe on average every 3 to 4 months. From my gameplay, it's looking like there was a strange mood happening maybe once every 2.5 to 3 hours. So that's kind of the way that it looks, but it's by and large random, not really something you can time. So when a strange mood occurs in the fort, the game basically checks from amongst the eligible dwarves in your fort, and one of those will be taken by the strange mood. So what constitutes an eligible dwarf? Babies are not eligible. Children and adult dwarves are. They are eligible to be selected to have a strange mood. Dwarves who have already completed an artifact, who've already completed a strange mood, they cannot be chosen again. And your militia, members of your militia can be chosen if they are off duty. However, if they are on duty, members of the militia with a rank greater than recruit cannot suffer a strange mood, or cannot be taken by a strange mood. I tend to say suffer. So members of your militia over the rank of recruit, if they are on duty, any member of your militia, if they're off duty, can be taken by a strange mood if they haven't already completed an artifact. I think this is done so that if you put your militia on duty and you send them down into the dungeons, down into the cavern, to take on a forgotten beast, you don't want one of them suddenly being taken by a strange mood, turning and running upstairs, leaving their comrades to die while they try and craft something out of bone and cloth. And obviously, individuals who are not members of your fort or not members of your government, so visitors, guests, long-term residents, they also are not eligible. So sadly, we're not going to see any of these naked goblins hanging around in my tavern, taken by a strange mood and creating an artifact. So when a strange mood kicks in, it will randomly select from amongst the eligible members of your fort. It is weighted based on profession. And again, I'll post that link below in the description to the Dwarf Fortress wiki, where you will get a list of the professions and how they are weighted. So some professions are weighted higher than others, are given a greater chance, basically, of being selected. Now, when a strange mood occurs, you're going to get a pop-up on the left-hand side. You're going to get a notification on the left-hand side, and a spooky noise is going to play. Here is some footage from my Twitch stream of Syrupvaults, of one of our dwarves being taken by a strange mood. Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. Itan, Itrurshur, Dwarven Child. has been possessed. If you've played Dwarf Fortress before the Steam version was released, you might remember that the game would pause when a dwarf was taken by a strange mood. That doesn't happen on the premium version. However, I'm going to post a link below in the description to a Reddit post that will tell you and show you how to mod one of the files so that you can actually get the game to pause when certain events happen, such as a migration wave or a strange mood taking one of your dwarves, if that is something that you want. So when the notification pops up, the first thing that you're going to be told is the name of the dwarf and the profession that has been taken by the strange mood, and you're going to be told the type of mood that they have been taken by. I'm not too sure what determines the mood. I think it's random. I think it's a random choice. Maybe between the 5. I get a feeling it's weighted towards the first 3, however. So there are 5 types of mood that your dwarf can be taken by. The most basic is a fey mood. This is where a dwarf will take over a workstation, and if you click on the station, it will tell you in plain language what they want to complete their artifact. Next is a secretive mood. And with a secretive mood, you can only click on the workshop, you can click on it whenever you want to, but you will only be told what they want if they are in the workshop. And what they want, the descriptions are slightly more cryptic. Now, they're not actually all that cryptic. They should be pretty easy to figure out. And if not, there is that link to the Dwarf Fortress wiki below in the description, where you can check out plain language definitions of what it is that they are looking for. Next, a dwarf can become possessed, just like I have. And possession is pretty much the exact same as a fey mood. They again explicitly tell you what it is that they want. I was screaming that I needed a microphone. Nobody brought me one, but I actually managed to find one here in the office. They will tell you in plain language what they want. There is, however, a very important distinction between fey moods and possession, which we will get into shortly. The next 2, I have never actually gotten one of these. So I'd be very interested if somebody has, if they would describe maybe one of the items that they got. A fell mood and a macabre or a macabre mood. Functionally, these are the same. In both cases, the dwarf will take possession of either a butcher's workshop or a tannery. They will then go and they will get generally something like a skeleton or remains or a corpse, and they will bring that back to the workshop and they will make something spooky from it. They will make something weird. Now, the difference is that with a macabre mood, they will go out, they will go into maybe the refuse pile or the corpse pile, they will search through it for the things that they need, and they will bring those back. With a fell mood, the dwarf will take over a workshop, and then they will go out and they will find the items they need by murdering the nearest dwarf to them and dragging their corpse back to the workshop to make something nice from their remains. So those are the 5 types of strange mood that a dwarf can be taken by. The next part of the notification that we get is what workshop the dwarf has taken over. Now this is where we can start to manipulate things a small bit. The workshop that a dwarf takes over is dependent on what is referred to as their highest moodable skill. This is how it's described in the Dwarf Fortress wiki. There's no solid definition as to what exactly a moodable skill is, but if you check the link to the Dwarf Fortress wiki, you will get a full list of what the moodable skills are. I think the best way that we can understand how these skills work is to take a look at a few dwarves around Syrupvaults and get an understanding. If they were to be taken by a fey mood right this moment, or a strange mood right this moment, what workshop would they take possession of? We have a lot of injured-looking people wandering around our fort, which is keeping our doctors quite busy. Here is our bone doctor, Aleth. We can see them just below the 2 silver doors in one of the stockpiles. And here is a list of their skills. So if they were to be taken by a strange mood right this moment, their highest skill is Bone Doctor. Bone Doctor is not a moodable skill. So we will go on to the next one. Talented Wound Dresser. Wound Dresser also is not a moodable skill. Clothier, however, is. So if Aleph was to be taken by a strange mood right now, they would take control of a clothes workshop and they would make an item which is available in the clothes workshop. Here is another one of our doctors, a diagnostician, Rakos. He has a number of skills, but the highest skill that he has that is moodable is Novice Tanner. So if he was to be taken by a strange mood right now, he would take control of a tannery and he would produce something there made from leather. Now what about where somebody doesn't have a moodable skill? You might remember that I said that children can be taken by strange moods, but they don't have skills. They haven't been able to work anywhere, to build any skills. Here we see a child, and they are a dabbling milker and a dabbling planter. So what's going to happen here? If a dwarf is struck by a strange mood and they have no moodable skill, they will take over a crafts dwarf shop, and they will produce something, either a bone craft, a woodcraft, or a rock craft. And the same is true for adults who don't have a moodable skill. So here we can see Shorast watching the naked goblins dancing in the tavern. And if he was to be taken by a fey mood right now, because he has no moodable skill, he would take over a crafts workshop and he would craft something either out of bone or shell or wood or rock. And he would also become legendary at that skill. I'm going to talk about that now in a few moments. So if you have a lot of children in your fort, a lot of peasants, a lot of farmers who don't have moodable skills, you could end up in a situation where you have a lot of crafts dwarfs. So this is one of the first areas where we can manipulate the outcome a slight bit. If Shorast was to be taken by a fey mood right now, they would take over a crafts dwarf's workshop because they have no moodable skill. So what we can do is we can come to a metalsmith's forge and we can add a new task. I would like in this fortress a legendary weaponsmith. So I'm going to come to weapons. I'm going to come to copper and a copper warhammer. And I'm going to assign to work at the station Shorast. Now it's going to take me a while to find them.
3 hours later.
Oh, what I wouldn't give for search bars in this game. Here is Shorast hiding out at the bottom. So I'm going to assign him as the only worker that can use this metalsmith's forge. And we have our task, which is to forge a copper warhammer. It's of absolutely no use to me. I'm probably going to smelt it down as soon as it's made. And if needed, make sure that you come to your dwarves' labour tab and assign them to do the labour that you want them to. So Shorast will not produce weapons unless I allow him to take on the weaponsmith work duty. And now he will go and produce one crappy warhammer. And after quite a lengthy period of time, because he has absolutely no idea what he is doing, Shorast has created a single copper warhammer. And we can now see that he is a dabbling weaponsmith. I can now take Shorast off of the weaponsmith task because I do not want him ever again making a weapon because he is useless. But if Shorast is ever taken by a strange mood, prior to this, he would have become a crafts dwarf. Now, he is going to become a legendary weaponsmith if we get the item created. So this is the first bit of manipulation that we can do, is when you get migration waves, maybe look at the skills that the people have. And think to yourself, if this person is taken by a fey mood or by a strange mood, what are they going to produce? And especially with the likes of peasants, with planters, herbalists and butchers, think about maybe putting them, giving them the very bare bone basics of a skill that you would like. You can never have too many legendary weaponsmiths, you can never have too many legendary armorers. So by getting somebody with no moodable skill to make a single item that you then just melt down afterwards or sell, if they're ever taken by a strange mood, they will have expertise in that area, or they will make something in that area instead of making something out of bonecraft. So let's pretend that Shorast has been taken by a strange mood. He's going to take over one of these two metalsmith forges, and he's going to make a weapon. What type of weapon is he going to make? We don't know. It's random. Not alone is it random, it's actually, for most items, decided at the very end of the construction period. So, if Shorast was to take over one of these workstations, and I really wanted a warhammer, I could save the game, and when he completes the item, if it's not the item that I want, I could reload, and most likely, I'm going to get a different item. Some dwarves have a preference for specific items, and if they do, generally that's what they're going to produce. I don't actually know where to see what items they have a preference for, but if somebody has a preference, we'll say for a spear, and they take over a metalsmith to make a weapon, they're going to make a spear. You reload the game, they're going to make a spear again. So it's generally determined either by their preference or pretty much at random. So when a dwarf takes over a workshop and begins working on an item, the first thing that they pick up is going to be the base material of the object. So here we have a bed, but it is no ordinary bed, it is no moodist. A wombat bone bed. This was the first item, the first artifact that was created in Syrupvaults, and it was created at a crafts dwarf's workshop. Now you might think, wait, beds can't be made at the crafts dwarf's workshop, they can only be made at the carpenter's. That's absolutely correct, but if somebody has a strange mood, and they take over either the crafts workshop or the jeweler's, there's a lot of impossible things, such as bone beds, that they can make. So the person who made this, the first thing that they wanted was bone, and they went, and the first piece of bone that they picked up was wombat bone. This is the next area where we can start manipulating the item that's going to be produced. A famous example of this, I'll post a link below, is to Krugsmash's series on Scorch Fountain. One of his dwarves went into a fey mood, or into a strange mood, and they wanted a skeleton. Now, they worshipped Rox, the bird, ROC, and I think one of the Rox had actually killed their son, and in the fortress they had managed to capture a few of them and kill one of them, so they actually had the skeleton of a rock lying around. So what Krugsmash did was he forbid every single corpse, every single skeleton in the refuse pile except for the skeleton of the rock. And as this was the only thing that the dwarf could use, this is what they picked up, and this dwarf created a rock skull helmet. So when your dwarf is taken by a strange mood, you can click on the workshop, you can see the items that they're looking for, and it's going to be a general item, so they're going to want stone. And what you could do is you could forbid stone that you don't want being used in the item. Here, for No Moodist, he used wombat bone twice, and also used clear-cut tourmalines. So it would have said that he needed gems. And what we could have done is forbid maybe the cheaper gems, the way that the strange, moody dwarf would have taken some of the more expensive stuff, or I could have forbid the expensive stuff if I wanted to keep that for sale or for something else. So that is a way that you can guide the materials that are going to be used in the artifact. Very important for making sure that you don't end up with solid gold shields that are going to be of absolutely no use to you, or weapons made from useless materials. And also, with that example from Krug Smash, it allows you to make very specific and particular items that may have roleplay value in your game and in your fort. Okay then, so one of your dwarves has been taken by a strange mood. They have taken over a workshop, they have run off, they have picked up all of the materials that they needed. Maybe you have manipulated some of those materials. The next addition to the pop-up, or to the notification on the side that you're going to get, is that they have begun work on a mysterious construction. That means that the job is done. They're going to continue working until they have completed their item, and then you will receive a pop-up. Now, if they begin to idle at the workshop, they're hanging around there, they haven't begun construction on their mysterious item, there is an exclamation mark flashing above their head. This means that something has gone wrong. You need to click on the workshop to see the list of items that they need. Now, there might be multiple items. These are the remaining items that they need, and you can kind of think of this as being almost like a stack or an array in software development. They're going to move through the array from left to right. If they hit something that they can't get access to, they're going to stop. They're not going to go and get the other items. They're going to go from left to right, from top to bottom, through this array, through this stack, to get the items. So what you need to do is you need to basically figure out what are they missing, and then try and provide that for them. We're going to deal with what happens if you can't provide that in a moment, but for now we're going to take it that you have managed to provide them with everything that they need. The next thing is that the game will pause, and now you will get a pop-up on screen telling you of the completion of an artifact. We're out of silver bars. Dwarven Child has created Osleb Gedan, an oaken amulet. He offers it to the innocent paints to write that he should. You will be told its name, and you will be told some dramatically important information. You will be told one of three things: whether the dwarf has offered the item to the local government, so that's basically your fort, whether they have claimed it as a family heirloom, or whether they have claimed it as a family heirloom in the name of an ancestor. And the difference between these three is absolutely nothing. By and large, they're all functionally the same. The dwarf completes the object, drops it on the ground, and goes off about their normal life. It's just a bit of a pop-up for flavor text. If somebody claims an item as a family heirloom, they're not going to take possession of it and run off with it. If it's stolen, or if it gets destroyed, which is very difficult, they don't really care either, so it doesn't make much of a difference. Functionally, all that happens is that the item gets dropped on the ground, it's left in the workshop where it's completed, and probably gets stored away someplace. The other thing that happens is, in most cases, the dwarf who finished that strange mood, they will become legendary in the skill that they used. So what we are going to do is we are going to take a look at some legendary individuals in Syrupvaults who have had strange moods and who have produced some of the greatest artifacts known to dwarven kind. We'll start here with Zugler Magic Lance, and we can see that they are the creator of No Moodist, the wombat bone bed that we saw in the apartments of our Duke. And they're hanging out here in the Craftsdwarfs Guild Hall, actually standing in front of a statue of her grandmother, our Necromancer Mayor, Ushrir Attic Pages. They are 21 years of age, and if we look at their skills, they are a legendary bone carver. So like I said, they were a child when they were taken by a Fey mood, or strange mood. I think it was actually a Fey mood. I keep saying Fey mood when I mean to say strange mood, but I do think that this was a Fey mood. It was the first strange mood that we had in the fort. They picked up a number of items and made a wombat bone bed, something that should not exist. But Zugler willed it into existence. And when they completed that Fey mood, they became a legendary bone carver. Here, just beside our prisons, just in front of a hunting dog, is Taltig. We can see that Taltig has a rather long name, and they're also described as a leather worker, and they are the creator of Anshen Bekar. Now, Taltig is not a leather worker. He is actually a legendary fighter. He is a great hammer dwarf, and he is improving with each descent into the caverns that he makes. The last descent wasn't great. He lost a few things down there. He lost a friend, and he lost his right upper leg. So that's why it looks like he's only wearing one shoe. But if we look at his items, I have equipped him. We should come to his military and check his uniform. I have equipped him with a number of things. I have equipped him with Id-Ud. We're going to be looking at this again later. The warhammer that was wielded by his friend Shorast. A different Shorast to the one that we've been looking at all evening. Before she was killed in the caverns. And he is also equipped with Anshen Bekar. And he is the creator of Anshen Bekar. I don't think he actually has it equipped at the moment. But we can take a look at it. It is a common skate leather buckler. So it's not as good in any way, make, shape, or form as a masterwork steel shield. But I do like the idea of him wielding this shield, the shield that he himself created, and also on the item is an image of Aiden Roof-Abbes, the dwarf that is the queen of our civilization and the granddaughter of our necromancer mayor, Ushrir Attic Pages. She is a half-sister of Zugler, who we were just looking at, the creator of No Moodist. And we can see from the skills of Taltig that he is a legendary leather worker. So he didn't really have any great skills. He was a dabbling blacksmith. He was probably either dabbling or just beyond dabbling as a leather worker, and that is the skill that was chosen, and he created a shield. Now, before we go and look at its creator, we're going to look at the item first of all, Moodable Ubal Tun. I forget what its actual name is. It's Rain Seas the something or other. A conglomerate mechanism. It is adorned with hanging rings of sandstone. On the artwork, or on the item, there is some artwork relating to the foundation of Syrupvaults. There is an image of Aiden Roof-Abbes, our queen, ascending to the position. But there is also, on this mechanism, which is called Rain Seas, on the item is an image of Rain Seas, the spirit of doors, the conglomerate mechanism. There is an image of the mechanism on the mechanism. It's the instructions, obviously. It makes sense. Now, this item was made by somebody with a mechanic skill, and so it was made at the mechanic's workshop, and as you can imagine, upon completion, they became a legendary wood burner. Here is Domas, the creator of Moodable Ubal Tun, the mechanism that we just looked at. And there is their mechanic skill. They're proficient, but they're quite rusty. They're not legendary. So you will remember that I said earlier on that there was a bit of a difference between a Fey mood and a possession, which is what has happened to me. If a dwarf undergoes a Fey mood, a secretive mood, a fell mood, or a macabre mood, when they complete an item, the skill that they used to make that item, they will become legendary in that skill. That does not happen for dwarves that have been possessed. They gain 0 experience. So what you are watching is an artifact video. And after this, all the videos that I make are going to be just as crap as all the other ones, because I will have learned absolutely nothing from this experience. So Domas was possessed. His highest Moodable skill is mechanic, so he went to the mechanic's workshop, built a mechanism, and then gained no experience and continued on about his life as a legendary woodburner. So if somebody becomes possessed, you're going to get a legendary item from them, but unfortunately, or you're going to get an artifact from them, but unfortunately you're not going to get a legendary skill. So with 4 out of the 5 strange moods, your dwarf, if they survive, is going to become legendary. So you can now understand why it's important to maybe manipulate the moodable skills of the likes of peasants and farmers, spinners, people who don't have moodable traits. You can see why it might be valuable to give them something like metalsmith or a weaponsmith or armor, or even to look at some people who do have moodable skills, whose moodable skill might be something to do with stone crafting. You might want to get them to make a couple of crappy hammers just to get them a higher moodable skill in something that might be more used to you, because you could end up with a legendary armor, a legendary weaponsmith, instead of a legendary bone crafter. Now that your dwarf has finished building their legendary item or their artifact item, what do you do with it? What can you do with these artifacts? The first thing you can do is just use them for their normal uses. They function just as a normal non-artifact item would. One of the first artifact items that was created, not the very first, but one of the first, was a llama wool bag. And my farmers, as soon as this was put into a stockpile, the farmers picked it up and filled it with seeds. So when the farmers demanded a guild hole, I thought it would be a nice idea to place that llama wool bag on a pedestal, still full of all the seeds. There it is. And they're delighted with it. So for a good while this was in a seed stockpile. And over here in our barrels and buckets we have a copper bucket, an iron bucket, and try saying that 3 times fast. We have a copper bucket, there's bits of dingo leather on it, there's yak leather, there's images of things, and yeah, it's just hanging around. It's worth 7.5 grand, or just over 7 grand, compared to this bucket, which is, it's nearly 10 times more expensive than that bucket, but yeah, it's just hanging around inside our bucket stockpile. Artifact weapons and armor are better than their non-artifact equivalents. Artifact clothing is immune from wear. Artifact mechanisms don't fail as often. They're better than their non-artifact equivalents. And the interesting one is artifact furniture. It cannot be destroyed. So, if you are lucky enough to get an artifact door, you could place that at a choke point in your fort, and forgotten beasts, titans, they're not going to be able to break through it. Other than that, these items can be used for their everyday normal purpose. Another use, of course, in the very early days of your fort especially, would be as a trade item. We just saw there we had a bucket that was worth over 7 grand. And if you have no immediate use for it, you could trade it for quite a lot of goods, especially if you're trying to get your fort up and running at the very start. Now, probably the main thing that I use artifacts for is increasing the value of rooms. Here is a temple to the Godly Coven. They asked me at some stage to create a temple for them, and I did so. The requirement was to get the room up to a value of 2,000. I was able to do that by putting in an altar, putting in a chest, putting in a statue of Ushrir Attic Pages, our necromancer mayor. and that kept them happy for a while. Then they came back and asked for a temple complex, and this requires getting the room up to a value of 10,000. Now, most of the floor was engraved at that stage, so what I decided to do, I think I engraved the walls and put in a pedestal, and on that pedestal I put an artifact. And that has gotten the room up to just over 10,000. So these artifacts can be tremendous in getting the value of rooms up for guild halls, for your temples, and also for your nobles. If your nobles want particularly expensive rooms, grand mausoleums and things like this, you can put in these artifacts to increase their value. Now, something to be wary about if you are going to use artifacts to increase the value of rooms is that artifacts are going to attract thieves. This room, this temple, I got it up to temple complex status by placing an artifact on this pedestal, but not this artifact. What I placed here was a ring called Ruther Fancies, and if you watched my video on justice and intrigue, you might remember that Ruther Fancies was stolen by a snake woman called Ebak. So when that ring was stolen from here, I didn't immediately replace the artifact. I didn't immediately put anything back on this pedestal, and a short while afterwards I got a notification that I had failed in my mission, in my quest, in my task to provide the godly coven with the temple complex, even though I had already done this and I had received confirmation that I had done this. So if you ever get a room, a temple or a guild hall up to a certain wealth, if it ever falls below that wealth again, you have a certain amount of time to bring the wealth value back up, or you will have failed that task. So I failed this task. There was a lot of unhappy people. The godly coven came back again at a later point in time and asked me to give them a temple complex. So all I did was place this scepter on the pedestal. We got the wealth back up to just over 10,000. Everyone was happy until this fool, Coupe, came along and tried to steal the item, and he actually took it off the pedestal and he made a run for it, and he was a couple of floors from the door when the hammer dwarves descended upon him and smashed his head in. And from what I know, a good head smashing is the only solution to theft. Here is a Goblin Gelder Bleak zombie. If goblins show up who are not poets or bards, especially undead, or any type of undead, you should be heavily suspicious of them. And if we look at their items, we will see that they have an artifact. And the reason that he has this artifact is that it was stolen. It's an instrument, and it was in a chest in one of our temples. I don't know if instruments in chests contribute to the temple wealth. I don't think so, but I'm not sure. This one definitely isn't, because it was stolen by this guy. It was actually stolen by Ast, a former militia dwarf who became a baroness, and she stole this and handed it over to him. I saw it myself. And he was, again, just a couple of floors from getting out when I managed to get him arrested. The militia dwarves managed to capture him, or the internal security. Now, unfortunately, there is no way of getting him to dump this item. I've tried a number of different things. I've tried turning this into a dumping zone. I've tried forbidding things. I've tried various different solutions that are up on the Dwarf Fortress wiki that do not seem to work with the Steam version. So at the moment, sending in the axe dwarves to chop this guy up, that is the only way that I am getting this thing back. So far, we have dealt with strange moods when they succeed. What about when they fail? The first question is, how can they fail? A strange mood can fail if the dwarf has no workshop, or if they don't have the items that they need. So if they don't have the workshop that they need, or they don't have the items. I was going to say that This is a common problem at the start of your fort. I'm into the year 109. This fort is almost 10 years old. If somebody whose highest moodable skill was glassmaking was to get a strange mood right now, I would be in trouble because I do not have a glassmaker's workshop. So if they were to get a strange mood, they wouldn't move, they wouldn't claim a workshop, they would have an exclamation mark flashing over their head. I would have to try and build a workshop for them. They themselves cannot build that workshop. So that is something to be wary about early on in the game. So it might be valuable when you start out creating one of every workshop, even if you don't need them, even if you don't have people who are skilled enough that you would bother setting up a glass worker's workshop. Maybe it's just a good idea to create it in case somebody gets a strange mood. The main way that they can fail is if you don't have the items. And this actually happened to me on one of the streams. There are a couple of items that when people are setting up their fort, they don't want to see dwarves demanding as part of a strange mood. One of them is glass. Where I'm based here, we have no sand, so all of the sand that we can see down here is sand that I've been buying. I swear, I'm going to start glassmaking soon, I swear. But the other one is silk cloth, and unfortunately I did not follow the advice that I'm about to give you and buy some silk cloth in trades early on. I left it too late, somebody demanded silk cloth, and I went on a mad run to try and find the caverns. I hadn't found the caverns yet, and I wasn't able to find them in time. Now I suppose the first question is, how did I know that they needed silk cloth? They weren't moving from their workstation, so I knew something was wrong, and clicking on the workstation gave me a flashing list of all of the things that they wanted. They wanted logs. There's logs right there next to them. They wanted rock. They wanted stone. There's stone everywhere. They wanted other things that I knew we had. Silk cloth I knew was the item that we did not have. Now when a dwarf idles, so they are in their workshop and they are waiting for an item, or they are waiting for a workshop to be built for them, a countdown begins. And the Dwarf Fortress wiki says that it's roughly a month and a half, about 41 days, something like that. And if you can't provide the workshop that they need or the items that they need by the end of that countdown, they will go insane. Now, if they want an item and they're waiting 2 weeks for it, and you then provide them with that item, the countdown resets to 0. If they want another item and they can't find it, the countdown will begin. You still have a month and a half to provide them with that item. It's not like you have a month and a half tops to get this thing made. So you could, if you wanted to be particularly mean, you could probably stretch this out for a couple of years. If somebody wants a lot of items, you could stretch it out by forbidding items and just doling them out after 40 days. So what exactly happens when a dwarf goes insane? They could become melancholic. They could go stark raving mad. There's another one that I forget. They're not too bad. Basically, the dwarf is going to run around the fort, crying and screaming, before eventually starving to death. So that's not too bad. The other one is that they will go berserk, and they will begin to kill anyone around them until they are taken down. And this is why some people are quite afraid of strange moods, because if you are unable to provide the requirements, there is a chance that your dwarf is going to go berserk and start killing the people around them. Now you can see here, I have what is basically an industrial complex. Up here are my metalsmith forges. I've started moving some of them downstairs. Here is my jeweler's works. I think we have a legendary gem cutter. My legendary bone carver, Zuggler, might be using some of the crafts dwarf stations over here. So if I have somebody take over this workshop and they go berserk, there is a good chance that they are going to deal tremendous damage to the economic viability of this fort. So you need to be prepared for failure. So there are 4 main ways that you can prepare for failure if you are unable to provide the items that your dwarf needs. It might be that you don't have glass for them. It might be that you don't have silk cloth. Maybe you've all the stuff that's needed, but maybe it's in a part of the fort that's off limits due to a forgotten beast wandering around there. There's a number of different reasons why it might fail. A dwarf throwing a tantrum might actually destroy the workshop that the dwarf with a strange mood is using, and that's also going to cause them to go berserk. So there are a number of ways that you can deal with this. The easiest way is to not deal with this. Basically just hope that somebody around them will eventually kill them, and they will, but it might cause a bit of damage. The next thing that you can do is bring in the military. Now, for the dwarf that took over this station and was looking for silk cloth, as time was passing, and I got the feeling we're not going to be able to provide the silk cloth for him, I took the decision to establish a patrol around his workstation and to assign the militia dwarves, the hammer dwarves, to that patrol route. And as we had broken into the cavern, I got a pop-up that he had gone berserk and that he had been taken down by the hammer dwarves. Basically, the first thing he did was went for one of the hammer dwarves that was surrounding him, and everyone turned on him immediately. I don't know if a dwarf that goes berserk is hostile, and if they are automatically attacked, or if they have to attack somebody first of all, but the fact that the people closest to them to attack were all militia, it kind of protected my other important, legendary dwarves. An important thing to note is that if a dwarf does go berserk, and you come down to the squads menu, you select one of your squads, you click on the assign a kill order, and you assign it to the dwarf that has gone berserk. If they kill that dwarf, you could be in for a loyalty cascade. People are going to be unhappy. You unjustly killed this dwarf, even though they may have taken out 2 or 3 people at this stage. So the best thing to do is to try and get the military in, surrounding them the way that they will, the dwarf will attack them, and they can fight back and take them down. The next 2 solutions are basically variants of the Cask of Amontillado. Now, my complex here is not set up to do this. It's not set up very well at all. We have stairs going down, and we don't have space around the workstations. So if we were to drop down to the new metalsmithing area that I am building, you will see that I also have not prepared this for this eventuality either, but I put up a bit of a demonstration over here. What I'm doing is I'm putting in a workshop here, and I'm putting in a workshop here, just as an example. And let's say that they've been built, and that these areas have been mined out, so there's maybe storage in here. Somebody takes over this workstation, and it becomes apparent that we're not going to be able to provide them with the things that they need. Very simply, we can come down to constructions, we can come down to wall, and we can build that. Let's say I'm just picking anything random, and then we can go to wall again and make the problem go away. And everyone is happy. They might just go insane and become stark raving mad. Well, they're going to be running around in there. They're not going to die somewhere random and cause people to be upset. You know full well where they are. If I need to wall in this one here, I can do the same thing. But if they go berserk, then of course they're just going to be running around inside in that little area until they die. There's no injuring these guys, taking them to the hospital, and they recover. When a dwarf is struck by a strange mood, They are either going to create an artifact or they are going to die. Those are the only two eventualities. Well, they're either going to create an artifact and die at some time later on in the future, or they're going to die in the very near future. That's maybe the better way of putting it. Now, the solution that I just outlined there is a bit finicky. We need to build quite a lot of wall around the workstation. It's entirely possible that one of our dwarves will wall themselves in, so we will need to destruct the wall. And of course, if it's getting close to the time when we think that they might go berserk, then we're going to be sitting there and we're going to be waiting and praying that somebody hauls the bricks down and builds them in time. Probably the best solution would be to build these self-contained 3x3 areas, just large enough to contain the workshop. So we could actually just build them like this, and I've seen some people do this. This is a very nice setup. So they are completely compartmentalized. Or you could do it this way and have them split off by doors. Now, these doors actually haven't been put in place yet, but if we have a bit of a worry that the dwarf in here is about to go insane, what we can do is we can just lock the door. And we can lock the doors on either side. If there's a dwarf back here, they can still come out through this workshop and down through this hallway and continue on about their life, listening to the screams and the rage and the anarchy from this room as the time passes and the dwarf goes berserk. But what you will have managed to do is you will have managed to protect your fort. With either of these two casking solutions, you could just leave the door shut forever, never open them up again. If you're going to do that, do create a slab and engrave it and put it up somewhere to commemorate the dwarf, the way that they don't come back as a ghost. I think there's a bit of a bug. If somebody fails to make an artifact and you create a memorial for them, it will say creator of artifact and it will name the artifact as though they created it, maybe off in the heavens where they have gone to be with Armok. They have created that artifact. Once your fort is a few years old, you're going to have a lot of artifacts, and it's going to be difficult to keep track of where they all are. They're going to be moved around in storage. Maybe there's a specific one that you're looking for. You want to just check out its description. We have this handy dandy tab down here in the bottom left. Open the objects menu. I think that's an amulet. And this gives us these 4 sub-tabs. The first one, Artifacts, lists every single artifact that is in the fort, including ones that have been brought in by migrants and by guests. Now, down here at the bottom are the artifacts that actually belong to the fort. So we can see here is no Moodist. And here is the llama wool bag that is in our farmer's guild hole. There is the Trampled Passions, which is currently in the possession of a goblin zombie. There's one of the scepters that's in the temple. So if we click on any of these, it will show us where they are. Before that, however, are artifacts that we do, well, I won't say we don't possess. These are artifacts that were brought in by visitors or by migrants, largely visitors. So here is, for example, Smoke Flute. It is a symbol of the Count. And if we click on it, it will bring us to the Count who owns it. So it's on the possession of this Count. However, if we look at some of the other items, such as Shorast Age Figures, Family Heirloom, we'll just find that lying on the ground somewhere. I think we had a scenario with Shorast Age Figure. I think they've probably died. They've left quite a lot of things around here, including a goat bone floodgate, which I think is another thing that technically should not exist, and at the moment it's just lying here in the hallway next to a shoe. We'd better not ask too many questions. So that is the first tab. The second one is symbols. You might sometimes see that your engraver will engrave an image of the symbol of your government or the symbol of your people. So symbols look to be things that, they look to be images that you can basically select I think you can do it on the embark screen. If you go for an advanced embark, you can actually design the image of your government. You will see on the artifact screen that, for example, smoke flute is the symbol of the count. Now it's telling us here that we can do this from the nobles and administrators menu, but I don't see any options for this yet. So I'm thinking this is maybe that you can assign either artifacts as a symbol of a noble individual, or you can assign them maybe effectively an image like a coat of arms. This isn't something that has been implemented yet, however, by the looks of it. Next to that is named objects. Now these are not artifacts. These are normal, mundane objects which have been given names. Here we can see Shorast Dawnrack, and they have two items, Id Ud, the Rock of Will, and they also have a shield. And if we look at the Rock of Will, it's a steel warhammer. It's an exceptional steel warhammer, but it's just a steel warhammer. This is the weapon that was wielded by Shorast Dawnrax, one of our great hammer dwarves, when she descended down into the caverns and made war against the cavern fish spearmen, and it eventually claimed her life. But before it did, she named that weapon, and she named the shield that she wielded. Now, I have seen this in the older versions of Dwarf Fortress, that you can actually check out the kill list of named weapons. So if we were to go maybe into Legends mode, we might be able to do it. I think there's an in-game way of doing it as well. I'm not too sure. I know that in some of his series, Krugsmash has found weapons which are hundreds of years old, which were wielded by forgotten beasts and by giants, and he has handed these out to his militia so that they may once again taste blood. And we will descend deep down into the bowels of Syrupvaults, down into the nice library. I did not intend to make this look like a smiley face. It is just now that it has hit me that this looks like a smiley face. I'm probably going to change that. But the last tab is written content. And again, this contains all of the items which are in our library, as well as items which have been brought in by visitors. So Goblins for Everyone, or The Goblin for Everyone, is on the possession of Ozud, and it is authored by Ozud. It's actually quite common that goblins show up with their own books that they have authored. We can also see there's the Uncanny Pits before Howling Granite is stored on the ground. So I do know for a fact that Song is dead. So something happened down here. Song's book has been dumped. That's going to get added to our library quite shortly. The books here are only originals, so there are no copies. So if we check over here in the library itself, we can see that there's a copy of New Animal Courtship. Ugh. There's an original. There's a copy of The Tree in Practice. There's a copy of Victory by Locks. There's actually lots of copies of various different things, and they're not appearing on the list, because this list only takes into consideration originals. So originals are treated like artifacts. Copies are not. And this is a big problem with libraries, is that if you have a public library, you can have visitors will come in, they will read one of your originals, and they might very well leave with it. This actually happened to me with a book. Somebody visited the fort, wrote a book using the skin of a Tundra Titan that we had just killed and turned into parchment. They wrote the book, and then they left with the book, which is something I am still bitter and angry about. If you want a full count of the books that you possess, you can actually click on the library, and it will show you that there are 12 bookcases, and there are written objects, including copies, 42. But it doesn't actually tell you what the items are. Maniacal Incorporated YouTube channel has created Dwarf Fortress Tutorial, Strange Moods and Artifacts, a video. all craft worship is of the highest quality. On the video is a video of the video. Thank you all very much for joining me on this episode. I hope you've found it interesting and I hope you will take something of value from it. If you have any questions, post them below in the comment section and I, or hopefully somebody more sensible, will come along and answer them. If there is anything that I have said incorrectly, or if there's anything that I've skipped over or left out, do post that below as well, so that it can be of benefit to future viewers. And post below some of the more obscure, some of the stranger artifacts that you've come across in your forts. I'd love to know what some of the more bizarre artifacts are. I've mostly gotten scepters, chalk scepters, lots of chalk scepters and amulets, so if you've gotten anything strange, do post about that below as well. I'd love to hear about them. If you haven't done so already, give the video a like, think about following the channel, and check out below in the description a link to my Twitch channel where Syrupvaults will be continuing on. We're reaching or heading for our first decade in existence. I'm hoping we'll make it there, because we've been going down to the caverns a lot more often and less people have been coming back. So yeah, thank you all very much for joining me. Hopefully now over the next few days I'll what the hell is that? Oh god, no! They're sealing me into the office! No! No! I finished the video! I'm not going to go berserk!